Okay, so my name is Naomi Campbell, and this is my special occasion speech. And the theme of it is one of the scariest days of my life for me. So a couple background things first. My uncle, his name is Scott, and we grew up on a lake, and so he does a lot of barefooting. And for those of you who don't know what barefooting is basically water skiing without the skis. So you just stick your feet in the water and you're basically gliding across the water on your feet. And normally when you do this, you go around 40 miles per hour so that you can get fast enough speed so that your feet are out of the water and not dragging in the water. Next is my uncle likes to do this trick called the spin out. And so what it is when you get into the cove of a lake, so the U part of it, the driver turns and my uncle sits on his butt and lets the rope pull him out, and then he lets go of the rope as the boat is turning, which allows him to like skid across the water. And he's worn like a GPS before, and he's gotten up to 60 miles per hour with that. So that's just a little background knowledge. So on July 8th of 2018, my uncle was going barefooting in the morning, and he had a friend that was driving him. When I woke up, they were already out barefooting, so I was kind of watching from the dock. My dad was also with them, and I see my dad driving my uncle's boat back, which I thought was kind of weird because my uncle wasn't on the boat. So I went out to meet my dad on the dock to help him get the boat against the dock, and all I hear him say was, "Scott hit a dock." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean Scott hit a dock?" And he goes, "Scott hit a dock. I'm here to get the EMT kit in the back of his friend's car." So we get the EMT kit, and we're driving the boat over there. And from about 20 feet away, I look at this dock, and there's a bunch of people surrounding it. And my uncle's friend was currently doing CPR on him on the dock. And I have previous EMT training, so I have previous medical training. And so we got closer to the dock, and I jumped in the water. And by the time I got to my uncle on the dock, he had regained a pulse and was breathing, so there was no more compressions happening. But my uncle's friend was doing compressions for about 2 minutes. So I get to the dock, and I'm standing over my uncle, who has become like a father figure to me over the years, just because of how much time I've spent with him at this lake. And so I'm standing over him, and he has blood coming out of his nose. He has blood coming out of his mouth. He's pale, like super gray, barely breathing. He's pretty much just wheezing at this point. He's in agonizing pain. And a few minutes later, the paramedics finally show up, and I told them that I had previous medical training, so they had me help them get my uncle onto the backboard because they weren't sure of like a neck injury or a back injury. So I had to hold C-spine, which is where you hold the head to make sure it doesn't move, and we had to move my uncle over to this backboard. While this was happening, the police were already called, so the police were on scene at this time, and they had assessed that my uncle was bad enough that they needed flight for life, which is the helicopter that comes into situations where an ambulance takes too long to get to the hospital. So the helicopter landed in a field, and they loaded my uncle up into the ambulance and drove him over to this helicopter, and they helicoptered him to the hospital, where he went into the emergency room, and he got a chest tube, which is where they literally cut open the side of your, like, right next to your ribs and shove this tube into your lungs because you have a collapsed lung, which means you're not breathing. And so they put this chest tube in, and it's also to help the drainage of liquid out of it. So they put this chest tube in, and they did x-rays, and they learned that my uncle had 13 broken ribs. And if you're unfamiliar with that, you have 12 ribs on each side. So essentially, one whole side of his rib cage was broken. He also had a broken scapula, which is your shoulder bone, a broken collarbone, and a torn bicep. And this is all pretty much on one side of the body because of the way he hit this dock. And so my uncle spent the next 2 weeks in the hospital, and because of the location of the injury and what hospital they sent him to, I was the one that was closest to him. Everyone else had to drive over an hour, where I was only a 20-minute drive. So I visited my uncle every day in the hospital, and I saw how much confidence and how much strength he regained over those 2 weeks. My uncle is a very active person, so seeing him in the hospital and seeing him in really low spirits because of how much pain he is. And he had to go through a surgery that actually put metal brackets on his ribs because they were broken in so many places that they wouldn't heal on their own. So they put these little tiny brackets on his ribs that basically pulled them back together to help them heal. So he has, I believe, 8 brackets in there. So just being able to see how much his spirits were lifted in the time in the hospital and how much strength he gained back, and he's in full recovery now. Over the winter we actually went snow skiing, and that was the first activity he did, and that was only a couple months after the accident, so that was really cool to see. It also was an eye-opener for me. It helped me realize that the medical field is what I want to be a part of, and especially seeing Flight for Life come in, it helped me realize that the emergency side of things and trauma is what I want to be involved in. And I knew that watching my uncle pretty much lay lifeless on this dock and being able to help him however I could and comfort him made me realize that I can do this job. So it also inspired me to get back on my career field to become an EMT and then eventually paramedic. But that is the story of the day that my uncle almost died in a boating accident.